Trees are a great consideration when we're looking at landscapes, so they're kind of an anchor plant. We want to consider those first before we look at some of the smaller plants because they can create some microclimates. They add value to your home. They're also fantastic for the shade that we need so much of the year here. They provide a visual screen and also a wind screen that we need. It can be quite windy here for most of the year. And they also can provide shelter for wildlife, so food and nesting material for a lot of those critters that we want to see in our yards.
If you're starting from scratch, tree placement is the first place to begin. Due to their dominant stature and slow growth, it's good to get them in first. Then, based on their expected growth when mature, design the rest of your landscape around them, especially if you're working with a small space.
There are a lot of trees you can use, even if you have a small patio or a small yard, that are going to stay a little bit restricted in size. Things like Bauhinia, little leaf ash, there's a few sumacs that are small, Sephora or Texas mountain laurel. There's quite a few out there that will stay within 10 or 15 feet wide. What we always want to keep in mind is the mature size of the tree. We want to look around us, consider property lines, consider overhead power lines for sure. How big those trees are going to get, is that going to be a problem?
Clearly, choosing a native or indigenous tree for your landscape makes infinitely more sense than importing a tree that is used to a more temperate, moist climate. Fortunately, we can pick from a large variety of native or desert-adapted trees with a wide array of size and features.
So there are many trees that are well adapted to our conditions, whether it be extremes of temperature or low availability of moisture. And some of those would be mesquites, acacias, desert willows, African sumac. There's a lot of plants out there that are going to sustain themselves with very little on your part to really add for maintenance and irrigation.
Of course, one of the greatest benefits of trees is the shade they provide. There are many varieties of desert natives that create the comforting canopies so needed in our hot summers.
So some great trees for shade would be the mesquites, acacias, palo verdes, a lot of the oaks and the pistache as well can give us a really sizable plant and give us a lot of shade that we would like throughout the year. Some are evergreen, some are deciduous, so just bear that in mind when you're choosing for the plants that you want in your yard.
If it's blooms you're looking for, our desert again comes through with several varieties whose flowers are the envy of the world.
Some really great trees for blooms seasonally would be, again, acacias, mesquites, palo verdes are fantastic, Texas olive, desert willows. There's a lot of things that bloom at different seasons of the year, so you can really mix and match in a landscape to get continual blooms. And the bonus there is that those showy flowers are going to help to feed pollinators and bring them to your yard.
You can add function to form in your tree selection by adding fruit trees. Perhaps surprisingly, we have several possibilities for edible fruit trees, many of which actually thrive here, bringing your family a bounty of delicious fruit each year.
So some really great fruit trees that grow well for us in the desert are figs and pomegranates. They are amazing. They tolerate the drought, they tolerate those extremes of temperature without very much care. Low chill apples and some of the stone fruit like pear, plums, and peaches. And then some of the citrus and a little more frost sensitive plants need a little bit more protection, but definitely if we find those microclimates in our environments, we can grow some of those plants here as well very successfully.
But a word of caution, there are some trees you'll see commonly here both in the nurseries and in established landscapes that are not good choices. They are not well acclimated to this environment and become susceptible to pests. These trees end up struggling and are usually short-lived.
Ash is one of those. They're susceptible to a lot of diseases and potentially really susceptible to the emerald ash borer that's making its way across the United States right now. The purple leaf plum and the Bradford pear are also trees that are readily available here, but they're generally pretty short-lived in our climate and can pose some challenges in trying to grow them successfully. And there are a few things to consider that are toxic if you've got curious children or pets. So things like oleander, if ingested, are toxic, as are the seeds from the Texas mountain laurel. So just do a little bit of research before you make your plant selection just to make sure that you've covered all your bases.
Trees are a wonderful addition to our landscapes, especially here in the desert, as they bring much-needed shade and cooling. If you need more information and ideas about how to introduce trees to your yard or garden, the Springs Preserve is the best place to start.
We offer classes throughout the year. We have tours on the weekends that are led by our staff and volunteers, so you can come and talk to the experts and ask those questions that you may have. Additionally, just coming and visiting us and seeing what's growing, what looks good at different seasons is really helpful in identifying some trees that you may not otherwise have thought about for putting in your landscape. And we have plant sales twice a year in spring and fall, and that's a perfect opportunity to come and buy desert-adapted trees and plants that will do really well for you in your environment here.